The deep space research vessel HMS Discovery moved through the void like a metal fish swimming in an ocean of stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the display screens that showed nothing but empty space for millions of miles in every direction. They had been traveling for 3 months now, searching for signs of alien life, and so far they had found nothing but rocks and ice. Amy Carter sat at her station running tests on samples they had collected from the last planet they visited. She was only 22 years old, but she was the best xenobiology specialist Earth had ever produced. Her blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes focused completely on her work. She had volunteered for this mission, even though everyone told her she was too young and the journey would be too dangerous. Lieutenant Commander Pete Barnes walked over to Amy and looked at her screen. "Find anything interesting in those rocks?" he asked with a smile. Amy looked up and shook her head. "Nothing alive," she said. "Just the same dead minerals we have been finding everywhere else." Captain Morrison heard them talking and turned around. "Do not worry, Carter," he said. "We still have 6 more systems to check before we head home. Something is out here and we are going to find it." Amy nodded and went back to her work. She believed they would find alien life somewhere out here. The universe was too big for Earth to be alone. The ship's computer suddenly made a loud beeping sound. Navigation Officer Lisa Grant looked at her instruments with wide eyes. "Captain," she said in an excited voice, "I am picking up some kind of energy reading from the 4th planet in this system. It is not natural." Morrison moved quickly to her station. The readings showed massive power signatures coming from what looked like empty space near the planet. "Are you sure about this, Grant?" he asked. Lisa nodded. "Yes, sir. Whatever is generating this energy is huge, and it is definitely artificial." "All right, people," Morrison said loudly so everyone on the bridge could hear him. "This is what we came out here to find. Set course for those energy readings. Yellow alert." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Amy felt her heart beating faster with excitement. This could be it. This could be first contact with an alien species. The Discovery changed course and headed toward the energy source. As they got closer, the readings became stronger and stronger. Amy watched her instruments carefully, looking for any signs of biological activity. "Captain," she said, "I am detecting what might be life signs. The readings are strange, but there is definitely something alive over there." The main screen flickered and suddenly showed something that made everyone on the bridge stop what they were doing. A massive structure appeared in front of them as if it had materialized out of nothing. It was at least 10 times bigger than their ship and covered with strange organic-looking surfaces that seemed to move and pulse like living tissue. "My God," Morrison whispered. "What is that thing?" Before anyone could answer, the alien structure began to glow with a bright blue light. The Discovery's instruments went crazy with alarms and warnings. "Captain," shouted Chief Engineer Ron Kelly from his station, "they are scanning us with some kind of beam. Our shields are not stopping it." The blue light surrounded their ship completely. Amy felt a strange tingling sensation all over her body. The lights on the bridge began to flicker, and then everything went dark. When the emergency power came back on a few seconds later, Morrison tried to contact the engine room. "Kelly, report," he said into his communicator. There was no answer. "Kelly, do you copy?" Still nothing. Lisa looked at her navigation controls with a worried expression. "Captain, the engines are not responding. We are dead in space." Morrison felt cold fear in his stomach. "Can we get main power back online?" he asked. Before anyone could answer, the air in the middle of the bridge began to shimmer like heat waves. Shapes began to form in the shimmering air. 3 alien beings stepped through what looked like solid air onto the bridge. They were tall and thin, with gray skin that looked wet and slimy. Their heads were too big for their bodies, and they had large black eyes with no pupils. They wore no clothes, but their bodies were covered with what looked like metal implants that glowed with the same blue light as their ship. The aliens looked around the bridge, studying each human crew member carefully. One of them stepped forward and made a sound that was like metal scraping against stone. Somehow Amy understood what it was saying, even though it was not speaking any human language. "We are the Keth Mori," the alien said without moving its mouth. The words appeared directly in their minds. "You are specimens now. You will come with us for study." Morrison stepped in front of his crew, trying to protect them. "We are peaceful explorers," he said. "We mean you no harm. We just want to make contact." The lead alien tilted its large head to one side as if Morrison was an interesting insect. "You speak, but we do not require communication. We require data." More aliens appeared through the shimmering air. They carried strange devices that looked like weapons but also like scientific instruments. One of them pointed a device at Amy, and the machine made soft clicking sounds. The alien with the device spoke in the same scraping metal voice. This specimen shows interesting neural patterns. Prime researcher will want to examine this one personally. Amy felt terror wash over her as she realized what was happening. These aliens were not interested in peaceful contact. They saw humans as nothing more than things to be studied. She looked at Captain Morrison and saw the same understanding in his eyes. "Run!" Morrison shouted to his crew as he lunged at the nearest alien. The alien did not even move as Morrison's attack bounced off some kind of invisible barrier around its body. The alien pointed its device at Morrison and he collapsed to the floor unconscious. The other crew members tried to fight or run, but it was useless. The aliens had technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever imagined. Within minutes, the entire bridge crew was unconscious on the floor. Amy was the last one standing. She backed against the wall as one of the aliens approached her with its scanning device. "Please," she said. "We are intelligent beings. We have families. We have lives." The alien stopped and studied her with its large black eyes. "Intelligence is irrelevant," it said. "Family bonds are data points. Life is a collection of biological processes to be analyzed. You will provide valuable information about human pain tolerance and neural response patterns." Amy felt the alien device touch her forehead, and then everything went black. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was the scraping voice of the alien saying, "Take this one to the primary research laboratory. The others can wait in holding cells. Research Prime Vexthol will want to begin immediately." When Amy woke up, she was no longer on her ship. She was lying on a cold metal table in a room filled with strange machines and devices she did not recognize. The walls were covered with screens showing images of different alien species being tortured and dissected. She tried to move but found that she was held down by invisible restraints that felt like bands of solid energy around her arms and legs. A tall alien figure entered the room. This one was different from the others. It wore a flowing robe covered with symbols, and its metal implants were more elaborate. Its black eyes studied Amy like she was an interesting puzzle to be solved. "I am Research Prime Vexthol," the alien said in her mind. "You are about to contribute to our understanding of human biology. Your species is new to us and we are curious about your limits. This process will be quite unpleasant for you but very educational for us." Amy tried to speak but found that she could not make any sound. The energy restraints had somehow paralyzed her vocal cords. She could only lie there and watch as Vexthol activated the machines around her table. "We will begin with basic pain response mapping," the alien said as mechanical arms descended from the ceiling toward Amy's helpless body. "Then we will progress to more advanced neurological studies. Do not worry about death. We are very skilled at keeping specimens alive for extended periods during research." Amy closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. She thought about her friends back on Earth and her family who would never know what happened to her. She thought about Captain Morrison and the rest of the crew and hoped they were still alive somewhere in this nightmare place. The machines touched her skin and Amy screamed, silently as the first wave of agony washed through her body. The real nightmare was just beginning. Amy had been on the metal table for what felt like days, but she had no way to know how much time had really passed. The Keth Mori had machines that could make time move differently in her mind. Sometimes minutes felt like hours, and sometimes hours passed in what seemed like seconds. The aliens found human perception of time to be an interesting subject for study. Research Prime. Vexthol stood beside her table making notes on a device that looked like liquid metal flowing between his long gray fingers. He was fascinated by how much pain Amy could endure before her mind tried to shut down. Every time she reached her breaking point, the machines would bring her back and make her fully aware again. "Your neural pathways are quite resilient," Vexthol said as he watched the readings on his screens. "Most species begin permanent psychological damage after the first few hours. You have maintained coherent thought patterns for much longer." Amy wanted to tell him that humans were stronger than he thought, but she still could not speak. The energy restraints kept her body completely paralyzed except for her eyes. She could only watch and experience everything the aliens did to her. The worst part was not the physical pain, but knowing that Captain Morrison and her crewmates were watching everything through force fields in their prison cells. She could see them on a screen mounted on the wall. Morrison was pressing against the barrier trying to break through to help her. Pete Barnes was shouting something she could not hear. Lisa Grant was crying. They all looked like they had not slept or eaten since being captured. The aliens were torturing them by making them watch Amy suffer. Your crew members are providing additional data about human pack bonding and emotional response patterns, Vexthal explained when he noticed Amy looking at the screen. We are learning that humans experience psychological pain when witnessing harm to their social group members. This is useful information for controlling your species in future encounters. A new machine lowered from the ceiling. This one had dozens of thin needles that began inserting themselves into different parts of Amy's body. She felt each needle find nerve clusters and begin sending electrical pulses directly into her nervous system. The pain was beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. The alien researcher watched his instruments carefully as Amy's body convulsed against the restraints. "Excellent," he said. "Direct neural stimulation is producing fascinating results. Your pain receptors are far more complex than we initially calculated." Hours passed. The machines never stopped working. Amy's body was pushed to limits that should have killed her, but the alien technology kept her alive and conscious through everything. They mapped every nerve in her body. They tested her reflexes under extreme stress. They studied how her brain functioned when flooded with different chemicals. "We are particularly interested in the human concept of hope," Vexthal said as he activated another device. "Our research indicates that your species maintains irrational optimism even in hopeless situations. We want to understand this psychological defect." The new machine began projecting images directly into Amy's mind. She saw herself back on Earth with her family. She saw herself graduating from the academy. She saw herself working in her laboratory studying alien samples. But then the images began to change. Her family was killed in horrible ways. Her friends died screaming her name. Everyone she had ever cared about suffered and died while calling for her help. "These are not real memories," Vexthal explained as Amy's mind reeled from the false images. "We are creating artificial experiences to study human attachment patterns and grief responses. Your emotional reactions are being measured and recorded." Amy tried to tell herself that the images were not real, but they felt completely real. She watched her mother die over and over again. She saw her father tortured by creatures that looked like the Kethmori. The artificial memories were designed to break her spirit and destroy her will to resist. "Interesting," Vexthal said as he studied his readings. "Even knowing the memories are false, your emotional centers continue to respond as if they were real experiences. Human psychology is more primitive than we thought." More time passed. The aliens tested Amy's physical limits by breaking bones and watching them heal with their medical devices. They studied her immune system by introducing diseases and then curing them. They examined her brain functions by stimulating different areas and observing the results. Through it all, Amy held on to one thought. Her crewmates were still alive. As long as Captain Morrison and the others were breathing, she had a reason to endure whatever the aliens did to her. She would not let her suffering be meaningless. She would survive this somehow and find a way to save her friends. "Your determination is admirable but illogical," Vexthal said as he noticed her brain patterns. "You have no possibility of escape or rescue. Your ship is destroyed. Your species does not know where you are, yet you continue to maintain hope for survival. This psychological defect makes humans inferior to more logical species." The alien researcher activated a new series of machines. These were different from the others. Instead of causing pain, they began scanning Amy's body at the molecular level. She felt strange sensations as the devices examined every cell in her body. "We are now beginning the terminal phase of our research," Vexthal explained. "We have gathered all useful data about human pain responses and psychological patterns. Now we will study your biological functions during the dying process. This will tell us how to efficiently eliminate humans if your species becomes troublesome in the future." Amy felt terror wash over her as she realized what was happening. The aliens were going to kill her slowly while studying exactly how humans died. This was not just torture anymore. This was execution disguised as scientific research. The machines began shutting down her body systems one by one. First, they stopped her lungs from working properly. Amy gasped for air as her breathing became more and more difficult. Her vision began to blur as her brain received less oxygen. "Your cardiovascular system is more resilient than expected," Vexthal noted as he watched her heart struggle to keep beating. "Most species expire much more quickly when deprived of atmospheric gases." Amy's heart began to beat irregularly as the machines interfered with her circulation. She could feel her body shutting down piece by piece. The pain was overwhelming, but worse than the physical agony was knowing that she was going to die without ever seeing her home again. "Please," she tried to say, but only managed to whisper. The energy restraints were finally weakening as her body failed. "Please do not hurt my friends." Vexthol leaned over her with his large black eyes studying her face. "Your concern for others even during your own death is another example of human psychological defects," he said. "Your crew members will provide additional research opportunities after we finish with you." Amy felt her heartbeat slowing down. Her vision was becoming dark around the edges. She could barely hear the alien machines humming around her. In the distance, she could hear Captain Morrison shouting her name, but his voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. "Vital signs are approaching termination parameters," announced one of the other aliens in the room. "Subject will expire within the next few minutes." Amy used her last bit of strength to look at the screen showing her crewmates. Morrison was still fighting against the force field, trying to reach her. She wanted to tell him that it was not his fault. She wanted to tell him to take care of the others. She wanted to tell him that humanity was stronger than these aliens realized. Her heart stopped beating. Her brain activity ceased. The machines registered the exact moment of clinical death, and Vexthol made his final notes about human biological termination patterns. Subject expired after 17 hours and 43 minutes of continuous research, he said into his recording device. Human pain tolerance exceeded initial projections by approximately 300%. Psychological resistance was maintained until final termination. Recommend classification upgrade for future encounters with this species. The alien researcher looked at Amy's still body with satisfaction. The research had provided valuable data about human limitations. Now he would begin preparing her corpse for detailed post-mortem analysis. There was still much to learn about human biology even after death. Vexthol turned away from the table to gather his instruments. Behind him, Amy's body lay motionless on the cold metal surface. Her eyes were closed and her face was peaceful for the first time since the torture began. The aliens had learned everything they wanted to know about human pain and death. What they did not know was that death was not always permanent. They did not know that some forces in the universe were stronger than their advanced science. They did not know that Amy Carter was about to become something far more dangerous than a human research specimen. In 37 minutes, they would learn that humans could be much more than they ever imagined. Amy's eyes opened. The laboratory was exactly as it had been when she died. The same machines hummed around her table. The same screens showed readings and data. Research Prime Vexthol was across the room preparing instruments for her autopsy. Everything was the same except for one impossible fact. Amy Carter was alive. She sat up on the metal table and the energy restraints that had held her for hours simply dissolved like smoke. Her body felt different, stronger. There was no pain from the torture she had endured, no weakness from dying. She looked at her hands and saw that all the wounds and marks from the alien experiments were gone. Her skin looked perfect, as if nothing had ever happened to her. Vexthol heard her movement and turned around. His large black eyes went wide with shock when he saw Amy sitting up and looking at him. The alien researcher dropped his instruments and they clattered on the floor. "Impossible," he said in her mind. "You expired 37 minutes ago. Your biological functions completely terminated. There is no scientific explanation for this." Amy stood up from the table and stretched her arms above her head. She felt amazing. Better than she had ever felt in her entire life. Every muscle in her body was filled with energy and power. She looked at the alien who had tortured her to death and smiled. "You made a mistake," she said, and her voice carried clearly through the room, even though the paralysis devices should have kept her silent. "You thought death was the end. For humans, it is sometimes just the beginning." Vexthol activated an alarm and other Kethmori rushed into the laboratory. They surrounded Amy with their weapons raised, but she was not afraid. She could sense their fear and confusion. These beings who thought they were superior to all other life were terrified by something they could not understand. "Restrain the specimen immediately," Vexthol ordered. "It is experiencing some form of biological anomaly. We must study this phenomenon." 3 aliens pointed their paralysis devices at Amy and activated them. The beams that should have made her collapse and become helpless simply washed over her without any effect. She walked toward them as if she was taking a casual stroll. "Your weapons do not work on me anymore," Amy said as she reached the first alien. She placed her hand on its chest and the creature screamed in a sound like breaking glass. The alien flew backward across the room and hit the wall hard enough to leave cracks in the metal. The other aliens opened fire with different weapons. Energy beams and projectiles filled the air around Amy, but none of them touched her. She moved with impossible speed, dodging attacks that should have been too fast for human reflexes. When she moved, her body seemed to blur like she was in several places at once. Amy reached the second alien and grabbed its weapon. The metal device crumpled in her hands like it was made of paper. She looked into the creature's black eyes and saw terror there. "You want to study pain responses," she said. "Let me show you what real pain feels like." The alien screamed as Amy touched its forehead. Images flooded its mind. Every moment of agony it had inflicted on countless research subjects over thousands of years came rushing back to experience all at once. The creature collapsed, writhing on the floor as it felt the accumulated suffering of all its victims. The remaining aliens in the room tried to run, but Amy was faster than they were. She moved between them like lightning, catching each one and giving them the same gift of experiencing their own cruelty. Within minutes, all of Vexthal's assistants were on the floor screaming or unconscious. Research Prime. Vexthal backed against the wall as Amy approached him. His scientific mind was trying to process what he was seeing, but nothing made sense. Humans were not supposed to have these abilities. Death was supposed to be permanent. His research had proven that humans were just another weak biological species. "What are you?" he asked as Amy stopped in front of him. "I am what you created," Amy said. "I am every being you have tortured and killed. I am their pain and their anger and their need for justice. You thought death would silence them, but you were wrong. Death just gave them a voice." Amy placed her hand on Vexthal's large gray head. The alien researcher felt his mind being invaded by thousands of voices. The consciousness of every creature that had died in his laboratories was speaking to him at once. They told him about their families. They told him about their dreams and hopes. They told him about the agony he had caused them. "Please," Vexthal begged as the voices grew louder in his mind. "I am a scientist. I seek only knowledge and understanding." "You seek only cruelty disguised as research," Amy replied. "You tell yourself that torture is science to make yourself feel better about being a monster. But I know what you really are." "They all know what you really are." The voices in Vexthal's mind began screaming for justice. The researcher felt every moment of pain he had ever caused being reflected back at him, magnified 1,000 times. His body convulsed as his nervous system overloaded from the psychic feedback. Amy let go of his head and Vexthal collapsed to the floor. He was still alive, but his mind was shattered. He would spend whatever time he had left experiencing the nightmares of his victims over and over again. "That is mercy compared to what you deserve," Amy said as she looked down at the broken alien. "But I am not here for revenge. I am here for my friends." She walked to the wall screen that showed Captain Morrison and the other crew members in their prison cells. They had watched everything that happened in the laboratory and their faces showed amazement and fear. Amy touched the screen and somehow connected directly to their cell's communication system. "Captain," she said, "I am coming to get you out of there." Morrison pressed his hands against the force field barrier. "Amy," he said with tears in his eyes. "My God, what happened to you? We saw you die. We saw your body stop moving." "I did die," Amy replied. "But death is not the end for humans. Not when there is still work to do. Not when our friends need us. I learned that today." Amy turned away from the screen and walked toward the laboratory door. She knew exactly where her crewmates were being held, even though she had never seen the layout of the alien station. The knowledge was just there, in her mind, along with understanding of Kethmori, technology, and the locations of hundreds of other prisoners. The corridor outside the laboratory was filled with armed aliens rushing toward her position. They had heard the alarms and screams from the research room and were coming to investigate. Amy walked toward them without fear or hesitation. "Stand down, human," the lead alien commanded as it raised a weapon that looked like it could destroy a building. "You will return to the laboratory for continued study." "No," Amy said simply. "You will let me pass or I will make you move." The alien fired its weapon and the energy blast struck Amy directly in the chest. The beam was powerful enough to vaporize a human body, but Amy absorbed the energy like she was drinking water. Her skin glowed briefly with the same blue light as the weapon and then returned to normal. "Thank you," she said to the shocked alien. "I was feeling a little tired." Amy walked forward and the aliens opened fire with everything they had. Dozens of weapons discharged at once, filling the corridor with deadly energy. When the light faded, Amy was still walking toward them, completely unharmed. She had absorbed all of their attacks and converted the energy into her own power. The aliens tried to run, but Amy was faster. She moved through them like a force of nature, disabling their weapons and knocking them unconscious with gentle touches. She did not kill any of them because that would make her like them. She was here to rescue prisoners, not to become an executioner. Within minutes, Amy had cleared the corridor and was walking toward the prison section of the station. Behind her, dozens of unconscious aliens lay scattered on the floor. Their weapons were destroyed and their confidence in their own superiority was shattered. Amy Carter had returned from the dead and she was coming to save her friends. The Kethmori were about to learn that humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Death was just the beginning. Amy moved through the alien station like she had lived there her entire life. She knew where every corridor led and where every room was located. The knowledge came from the voices in her mind. The spirits of thousands of victims who had died in this place were guiding her steps and showing her the way. The prison section was heavily guarded, but the aliens could not stop her. Their weapons were useless and their technology meant nothing against what Amy had become. She walked through force fields like they were made of air. She absorbed their energy attacks and used that power to grow stronger. She moved faster than their eyes could follow. Captain Morrison and the other crew members watched through the transparent walls of their cells as Amy approached. She looked like the same young woman who had volunteered for their mission, but there was something different about her now. Her eyes glowed with an inner light and she moved with perfect confidence. "Amy," Morrison called out as she reached their cells. "How are you doing this? What happened to you in that laboratory?" Amy placed her hand on the force field generator and the energy barrier flickered and died. Morrison stepped out of his cell and looked at her with amazement and fear. "I died, Jake," Amy said, using the captain's first name for the first time since they had met. "But dying connected me to something bigger than myself. Every being that has suffered and died in this place is part of me now. Their pain and their memories and their desire for justice." Pete Barnes stepped out of his cell and stared at Amy. "You are not human anymore, are you?" he said quietly. Amy turned to look at him and for a moment her face showed sadness. "I am still human, Pete. I am still the same person who wanted to study alien life and make peaceful contact. But I am also something more now. I carry the voices of the innocent and I speak for those who cannot speak for themselves." Lisa Grant was the last to leave her cell. She approached Amy carefully like she was approaching a dangerous animal. "What are you going to do to the aliens?" she asked. "I am going to free their prisoners," Amy replied. "All of them. Every creature that is being held against their will in this place. Then I am going to make sure the Kethmori never hurt anyone again." Amy led her crew deeper into the station. They passed laboratories filled with torture devices and examination rooms where aliens were dissecting living beings. In each room, Amy freed the prisoners and healed their injuries with a touch of her hand. The rescued creatures looked at her with gratitude and wonder. "There are hundreds of different species here," Morrison said, as they watched a group of freed prisoners helping each other walk to safety. "How long have the Kethmori been doing this?" "Thousands of years," Amy answered. "They see themselves as the superior form of life in the galaxy. Every other species is just raw material for their research. They have tortured and killed millions of beings in the name of science." The crew followed Amy as she moved through more sections of the station. Everywhere they went, she freed prisoners and destroyed the alien research equipment. Her touch could heal any wound, and her presence gave hope to creatures who had given up all hope of rescue. "Amy," Morrison said as they watched her help a group of injured aliens who looked like they were made of living crystal. "You are changing. Each prisoner you heal makes you different somehow." Amy nodded as she finished healing the crystal beings. "Each life I save adds to what I am," she said. "I am becoming the voice of every innocent being in the galaxy." The Kethmori created something they cannot control or understand. They reached the central command section of the station where the most important prisoners were being held. These were the leaders and scientists and artists from dozens of species. The Kethmori had kept them alive longer to study their advanced minds and cultural knowledge. Among the prisoners, Amy found beings who had been held captive for decades. Some had been tortured so severely that their minds were broken. Others had maintained their sanity through sheer willpower and hope for rescue. Amy healed them all and gave them back their strength and their hope. "You must leave this place immediately," Amy told all the freed prisoners. Take the Kethmori ships and return to your homeworlds. Tell your people what happened here. Make sure everyone knows that the Kethmori research program has ended forever. The rescued beings looked at Amy with reverence. They could sense the power flowing through her, and they understood that she was something far beyond anything they had ever encountered. Some of them tried to thank her, but she shook her head. "Thank me by living good lives and protecting the innocent in your own worlds," she said. "That is the only payment I need." As the prisoners began evacuating the station, Amy turned to her crew. "You need to leave too," she told them. "Take one of their ships and go home. Tell Earth what happened here, but do not try to find me again." Morrison stepped forward and grabbed Amy's arm. "We are not leaving you," he said firmly. "You are part of our crew and we stick together." Amy looked at his hand on her arm and Morrison felt a shock go through his body. For a moment he could sense what Amy was experiencing. The voices of thousands of victims filled his mind. Their pain and anger and desperate need for justice was overwhelming. He let go of her arm and staggered backward. "My God, Amy," he whispered. "How are you carrying all of that inside you?" "Because someone has to," Amy replied. "Someone has to remember them and speak for them and make sure their deaths were not meaningless. That someone is me now." Pete Barnes looked around at the empty prison cells and destroyed laboratories. "What about the Kethmori?" he asked. "What are you going to do to them?" Amy's expression grew cold. "They are going to experience what they put others through," she said. "Every researcher and every guard and every leader who participated in this program. They will feel the pain they caused and know the fear their victims felt." The station's alarm system began wailing as the evacuating prisoners took control of Kethmori ships. The remaining aliens were panicking as they realized their carefully controlled environment was falling apart. Their prisoners were escaping and their research subjects were fighting back. "The main research facility is on the upper levels," Amy said as she started walking toward a transport tube. "That is where the senior researchers and the station commander are located. That is where this ends." Morrison and the others followed her into the transport tube. As they rose toward the upper levels, Amy's appearance began to change. Her eyes glowed brighter and her skin seemed to shimmer with energy. She was drawing power from the voices in her mind and becoming something that the Kethmori had never faced before. "Amy," Lisa said quietly, "are you still you?" Amy turned to look at her and smiled. It was still the same warm smile that Lisa remembered from their time working together on the Discovery. "I am still me, Lisa," she said. "I am just more than I used to be. I am Amy Carter, and I am also the voice of every innocent being who has suffered at the hands of these creatures." The transport tube stopped at the main research level, and the doors opened. Waiting for them was an army of Kethmori soldiers armed with the most advanced weapons the aliens possessed. Behind them stood the station's research council and the supreme commander of the facility. "You will go no further, human," the commander said in their minds. "This rebellion ends here." Amy stepped out of the transport tube and looked at the assembled aliens. "No," she said in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your reign of terror ends here. Justice has come for you at last. The final confrontation was about to begin." The Kethmori opened fire with everything they had. Energy weapons designed to destroy starships filled the corridor with deadly light. Projectile weapons that could punch through armor plating discharged their loads. Weapons that attacked the mind and weapons that destroyed matter at the molecular level, all fired at once. Amy walked through the storm of destruction like she was walking through a gentle rain. Every attack that touched her was absorbed and converted into more power. Her body glowed brighter and brighter as the aliens poured their most advanced technology into trying to stop her. When their weapons ran out of energy, Amy was still walking toward them. She looked completely unharmed and more powerful than ever. The Kethmori soldiers began to back away in terror as they realized their superiority was an illusion. "Impossible," the station commander said as Amy approached the research council. "No biological entity can withstand that level of destructive force. You are violating every law of physics we understand." Amy stopped in front of the alien leaders and looked at each of them in turn. These were the beings who had ordered the torture and death of millions of innocent creatures. They had built their civilization on the suffering of others and called it science. "Your physics cannot explain everything in the universe," Amy said. "You forgot that some forces are stronger than technology. You forgot about justice and love and the power of those who refuse to give up hope." She reached out and placed her hands on the heads of 2 research council members. The aliens screamed as they experienced every moment of pain they had ordered inflicted on their victims. Their minds were flooded with the memories of creatures they had never bothered to think of as anything more than specimens. One by one, Amy touched each member of the research council. She did not kill them, but she gave them something worse than death. She gave them understanding. She made them feel what their victims had felt and know what their victims had known. The station commander tried to run, but Amy was faster. She caught him before he could reach an escape pod and forced him to experience the accumulated suffering of thousands of years of Kethmori research. The alien leader collapsed to the floor, gibbering in terror as his mind broke under the weight of so much pain and fear. "You wanted to study human responses to extreme situations," Amy said as she looked down at the broken aliens. "Now you know what it feels like to be on the other side of your experiments." Captain Morrison and the crew watched in silence as Amy finished dealing with the research council. The young woman they had known was still there, but she was also something far more powerful and terrifying. She carried the voice of justice itself, and she would not be denied. Amy walked to the station's main control center and placed her hands on the command console. The alien technology responded to her touch as if it recognized her authority. Information flowed through her mind as she accessed every record the Kethmori had kept about their research program. "They have detailed files on every species they have encountered," Amy said as she read through the data. "They know the locations of hundreds of civilizations throughout the galaxy. They have been planning to expand their research to include entire planets." She found the records of her own crew's capture and the analysis of human capabilities. The Kethmori had been preparing to send ships to Earth to gather more human specimens for study. They had seen humanity as a promising new source of research subjects. "Not anymore," Amy said as she began deleting the files about Earth and human capabilities. "They will never threaten my species or any other species again." Amy sent out a signal to every ship in the galaxy using the Kethmori communication network. Her message was broadcast to every planet and every space station, and every civilization that had contact with the galactic community. "My name is Amy Carter," her voice said across thousands of light years. "I am human, and I am speaking for all the innocent beings who have suffered at the hands of the Kethmori. Their research program is ended. Their scientists are destroyed. Their victims are avenged." The message continued with a warning that spread throughout known space. "Let every species know that humanity will not tolerate those who prey on the innocent. We do not seek to conquer or dominate, but we will protect those who cannot protect themselves. We have learned that death itself cannot stop us when there is justice to be done." Amy turned away from the control console and looked at her crew. They were staring at her with a mixture of awe and fear. She was still their friend and colleague, but she was also something beyond their understanding. "It is time for you to go home," she told them. "Take the fastest Kethmori ship and return to Earth. Tell them what happened here, but tell them not to look for me. I have work to do in other parts of the galaxy." Morrison stepped forward. "Amy, you cannot just disappear," he said. "You are still human." "You still belong with us," Amy smiled sadly. "I am human, Jake, but I am also something more now. I carry the voices of every innocent being who has ever been murdered by those who thought they were superior. So long as there are predators in this galaxy, there will be work for me to do." She walked to a viewing port that showed the stars beyond the station. The universe is vast, and there are other species like the Kethmori out there. There are slave traders and planet killers and those who see other beings as nothing more than property to be used and discarded. They need to know that humanity is watching, and that we will come for them if they do not change their ways. Pete Barnes joined Morrison at Amy's side. "What about you?" he asked. "What will happen to you?" "I will do what humans have always done," Amy replied. "I will stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. I will be the voice of the voiceless and the defender of the defenseless. It is what we were meant to be in this galaxy." Amy touched a control panel and a small transport ship detached from the station. "That ship will take you home," she said. "It has all the information Earth needs to understand what happened here and what is coming next." As her crew prepared to leave, Amy gave them one final message. "Tell them that humanity has a choice," she said. "We can hide on Earth and pretend the galaxy is not our concern, or we can become what the universe needs us to be. We can be the species that says no when others say yes to cruelty and injustice." The transport ship departed with the Discovery's crew aboard. Amy watched it disappear into the stars and then turned her attention to the task ahead of her. She had the Kethmori database of galactic civilizations, and she knew where to find other predator species. Months later, Amy Carter stood before the Galactic Council on their homeworld. She had spent the time traveling from system to system dealing with slave traders and research facilities, and anyone else who preyed on the innocent. Her reputation had spread throughout known space. The alien representatives looked at her with fear and respect. They had heard the stories of what happened to those who harmed innocent beings. Some species had changed their ways when they learned humanity was watching. Others had tested her resolve and discovered that human justice was swift and final. "I speak for humanity and for all innocent life in this galaxy," Amy said as she addressed the council. "We offer friendship and cooperation to those who respect the rights of others. We offer protection to those who cannot protect themselves. But to those who choose to be predators, we offer only one thing." Amy's eyes glowed as she looked at each alien representative in turn. "We offer them the certainty that their actions will have consequences. We offer them the knowledge that death itself will not stop us from seeking justice for their victims. We offer them a choice between changing their ways and facing the judgment of those they have wronged." The council chamber was silent as Amy's words echoed through the room. Every species present understood that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had evolved beyond death itself, and they would never again allow innocence to be destroyed without consequence. Amy Carter had died as a young human scientist, seeking peaceful contact with alien life. She had returned as something far more powerful. She had become humanity's promise that justice would always find a way to triumph over cruelty. The galaxy would never be the same,